Hello, welcome back to Eternally Amy. And I am in the last part of a series on journaling, and it is called Purge Journaling, a Purge System. And essentially, it's a bunch of different techniques that I have personally done over time. Nothing of this is mine, it's just bits and pieces that I've collected from other journaling methods that have already existed, and I've put them into one space. So, PURGE stands for powerlessness. So when we admit we're powerless over something, that is our power. So people, places, and things, situations in life, basically, if we have trouble starting off writing in our journal, that's a great place to begin a flow. Because the goal is we want to get to a foundational, like, yes, or at least for me, the goal is a foundational yes. And I think for all of us, we want to be able to have, a space where we can solve some problems and process what we're going through so that we don't have to carry that burden around. And the U is for understanding basically the differences between opportunities and obligations, and how when we turn an obligation into an opportunity, we have a far better reaction to life. We can naturally sort of see what priorities rise above the rest in the different areas, the different spokes off of the hub of our life are. And we get a chance to look at all of that on pen and paper and reevaluate and really get a lot of data and see where we're going, and maybe if that lines up with where we want to actually go. What is the direction that we want to take as people? And for me, I want to have an abundance mindset and not a scarcity mindset. And so it helps me to get there, to be on that path, to be on that cycle. It's not like there's an end all be all ending spot, but I would rather be cycling through and growing for the rest of my days, as opposed to like, oh, I've figured everything out now and we're good, right? So, journaling is a process that helps us to see all of that, to kind of, measure where we are on the pathway to become that person who's always fostering growth, if that's what we want to do. So, the R is reframing and resetting. So, we talked a lot about that, how to reframe things so that we are able to find something within what we're dealing with that is going to be helpful. So we look at the evidence that we have to support whatever thought or feeling we have. So if I think I'm a big idiot, well, what evidence do I actually have to support that? When I look back at my journals, I don't have evidence to support that. I have evidence that I'm a person trying my very best. So I'm going to do what I would assume for somebody else that they're doing their best. I am going to try and assume that for myself, that I am doing my best. I'm going to tell myself that in the mirror. And I'm going to repeat affirmations. And in the morning, I'm going to choose an intention for the day, similar to the way that the yoga classes have you do that. And then I'm going to collect evidence along the path of the day that will show me, no, you're on the cycle that you want to be on. You're on that beam, generally speaking. Um, and just because you think sometimes you're not, and your brain tells you you're not, no, 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 like look at the evidence. And so that's where we're going to get a chance to do that process. And then last time we talked about gratitude, and that is like the big shining star in this process, and really in life in general, extends far beyond journaling, right? But when we put the things that we are grateful for, we put pen to paper and we write those things down, or stylus to tablet, right? We write those things down. We suddenly see Oh my gosh. First of all, this problem that I thought was like this massive Mount Everest of a problem is actually maybe not so much of a problem. Or here's a little bit of movement, or here are some choices that I have within this problem. And with those choices, I'm going to find my power. And so it is at those crossroads or when faced with those choices that I'm going to be able to see that within the space of the confines of the things that I'm powerless over, I actually have some freedom. And that is kind of what we're trying to do throughout this entire journaling process is move from a place of fear to a place of freedom. And so that's what I unpacked in the gratitude piece is that sometimes we start with gratitude when we're journaling. Sometimes we end with journaling, or sorry, with gratitude when we're journaling. And sometimes it's woven throughout. And if I get to a point in my journaling where I cannot find anything to be grateful for, well, that's a problem. And maybe what I'll do is look at yesterday. Was there anything yesterday that I can be grateful for? And we're talking like the most mundane, boring gratitude possibility ever to the grandiose. Like, hey, I got to move into one of the rooms in the Taj Mahal. I'd be grateful for that too, right? Or it can be super small. Hey, I'm grateful for toothpaste today. Whatever it is, I am grateful personally every day for modern medicine and for the medication that I take for my heart that helps make it easier for my heart to perform at its best possible function, especially after my episode with cardiomyopathy, which I discussed in the last episode. And by the way, I never closed the loop on something. So I wanted to make sure that I came back to let you guys know. In that episode, I talked about whatever progress my heart had made for healing within that 12 months was going to be that was going to be where my heart stayed until death, right? So whatever heart functionality became my new normal was going to be it. It was not supposed to progress. My healing was not supposed to progress past that year mark. And yet, guess what? It did. It definitely took longer than a year. In fact, it took multiple years. But now, this all happened in 2018. So now, today, guess what happened? I am at the low range of normal for my heart functionality. And that is just like this huge blessing. And so for me, that is a gratitude element that is on repeat, right? Something that I can dig out, especially on those days where I'm feeling like, yeah, I can't really think of anything I'm grateful for right now. I'm always grateful for that, right? Like we have uh, people in our lives we're always grateful for. Like my kids, I'm always grateful for them. Like, there are some staple um, gratitude nuggets that we can just put on high rotation and should put on high rotation, right? Because those are the things that will remind us that we have breath in our lungs. We're so lucky to be here, and life is so short. It's just so short and so fleeting. So we talked all about gratitude. Today is the last day of this series, and it is the E in Purge, and that's going to stand for extras. So extras are like these little other additional journal techniques. And they are journaling techniques that, again, have been around the block. They're tried and true. And really, it kind of depends on, frankly, my mood and the situation I'm in to decide how I'm going to journal about something in particular. And maybe I journal about several different things in several different ways, or I use several different journaling techniques to process something that is a very specific incident, but I'm having trouble getting over, right? And spirituality, for those of you who think, oh, but you haven't really mentioned, you know, your higher power a lot. And the deal is this, is that my higher power is woven throughout all of this. My higher power is the one ultimately who gave me all of these tools and exposed me to these tools along these many years and brought them to the forefront when I got sober. And so to me, if I don't mention my higher power or the God in my understanding, it is simply because it's like a no duh. It's very obvious to me that the higher power of my choosing is threaded and woven throughout everything because on my own, just me with it's like a vacuum cleaner, right? That is not plugged into the wall. I am of little use, right? It is all because of my higher power. When I am connected to that source, I am able to do all of these things. And guess what? I am connected to that source. There is a divinity within me that I believe God placed inside of me. And I believe God has placed inside of everybody that is an expression and a further extension of who my higher power is through who your higher power is. And they can be different, and that is fine. Whatever your source is fine. So, back to extras. What we're going to do is talk about some of these journaling techniques. And the first one is friendly advice to a friend. So, this is where you can become the watcher of your thoughts. And we talked a little bit about this as when we were talking about the evidence, collecting evidence, right? So, when you become the watcher of your thoughts, you can even role play with somebody else, depending on how comfortable you are sharing the details of what you're going through with a friend. Or you can even look at yourself in the mirror and give yourself advice. So, what would you tell a friend who's going through the very same thing? And that's what I mean by the watcher. What is somebody who's separate from your situation? So it's like in that scene, if you're Gen X or North, when Harry Met Sally, when Meg Ryan's character is sitting at lunch with her friends, and this woman, Marie, her friend, keeps talking about this married man that she's sleeping with, and she continually says, he's never going to leave her. And Meg Ryan's character is like, yeah, we know. It's like the no-brainer of this century when you hear it from somebody else. But for us, or at least for me, when I am too intertwined in a problem or a perceived problem, right? When I'm too close to it, I can't see it because it is my situation. So sometimes I need to back up and think, what would I tell my best friend to do? What would I tell somebody else? Right. And I want to be empathetic and caring and loving and understanding. But at the same time, I want what's best for that person. Right. I'm not going to blow them up with, hey, hey, you stupid idiot, you should have left or you should have whatever. I'm not going to say that. And so likewise, I'm not going to say that to myself, or that is not a practice that I endorse. I endorse sowing seeds toward being a person who gives myself the same thoughts and suggestions that I would give a friend. Okay. So, that whole phenomenon that other people's problems are easier to solve than your own. So when your friend has this conundrum and they're like, what do I do? Right. And everyone's like, obviously, you should do this, you should do that. But they still deliberate, right? And it's just as clear as day to everybody else, and it makes sense to them. Um, you know, The other person, the person requesting the advice or the what would you do, is the one who's living the situation. And so that's where it gets tough. So if you can kind of just become the watcher of your thoughts and be objective, that's helpful, right? We don't get caught up in the details of the story and our own emotional perspective that's attached to it. And so that's the first one, friends giving friendly advice, right? And so, what would your friend do? You could say, what would Jesus do? You could say, what would, Snoop Dogg do? Whatever it is, but friendly advice that you would give a friend. Okay. So that's just quick spot check journaling or just walking yourself through a thought process in your head involving, hey, what would I tell a friend here in this situation? Right. Secondly, the second E is idea inversion. So for me, what this is about is practicing a reaction that I want to have to my problems in my everyday life. And that reaction is to look at the solution, but also to look at the opposite of that solution. Okay, so why would I want that reaction? Well, the reason is I want to do this because I find it makes the solution to things really, really obvious and simple to the point where not doing that looks kind of dumb, right? And this stuff is actually, it's kind of funny if you don't have a lot of deep emotion intertwined in it. If you can be like, oh, yeah, you know what I'll do? You know what is going to show my boyfriend really that, he should take me back? I should drive by his house and throw rocks at his window, and clearly he'll want to get back with me. It's like the no duh most obvious, no, he won't. He's going to call the freaking cops and you're going to get a restraining order heaped on you. And do you know what I'm saying? It is that kind of thing where it's like, look at the opposite. Look at what you want to do and what your kind of feelings are kind of telling you to do. And then just kind of go, okay, wait. And what if I don't do that? What if I do the complete opposite? I decide I'm not going to be mature. I'm not going to go and look at the root of why I'm feeling this way and deal with it on my own and recognize that I own that problem. And I'm not going to recognize that I'm in a grieving process. And I'm just going to go ballistic because that will help, right? That will get me what I want, right? I mean, it's almost obvious, but also helpful to lay it out that way because again, sometimes we're just too close to it, right? P.S. I was just randomly pulling that boyfriend throwing rocks at the window example out of the sky. I personally have never done that before. Just kidding. Yes, I have, which is how I know. You're welcome. Okay. So, um, the other example that I wanted to throw out of idea inversion is, let's say I want to write more, right? I want to incorporate more writing into my day. So it's kind of an open-ended problem to solve, but with this idea inversion, the idea being, this is something I want to cultivate in my life. This is my goal. um, you sort of just get better direction, okay, when you look at something open-ended like that and you apply this journaling technique. So, while I am, sort of pontificating about like, how am I going to be able to write more? I'm also asking, how can I write less? Okay. So, how can I write less? Well, I can leave my laptop open all night and run the battery out so that it is unusable in the morning, right? I can put all my pens and legal pads in places where I cannot find them, right? I can throw them away even. I can just get rid of them, right? Um, I could spend any moment of free time that I have on my phone, um, or downloading friggin' video games or doing whatever I want. And then I will likely be shocked at the end of the day that I haven't written more. Does that make sense? So it's looking at what the opposite is instead of like, hey, every night I'm going to set myself up for success in the morning so that I can write. I'm going to charge my tablet, my stylus, or my notebook. Or I'm going to charge my laptop because I know I have, excuse me, I know I have meetings in the morning. I'm going to make sure I'm prepared for that. I'm going to realize that the Word document that's on that laptop uh, is going to be in a spot that's easily found. So I'm not like digging through my laptop and all my files, right? I'm going to make sure that all my legal pens and my pads are in the space where I feel most creatively connected and prepared to write. I'm going to get the things out that I know are sort of my muses, right? Certain music ready to go on my phone. Maybe it's certain candles and essential oils that I like, right? I'm going to do all those things instead because those set me up for success. Okay. So it's almost like poking fun of ourselves a little bit. It's another Rule 62 adjacent type way of solving problems. Like, oh, okay, so this makes it very obvious what I can do to incorporate more writing into my life. You'll immediately see why you're not achieving your goal. If it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, every night I'm just letting my laptop battery run out, whatever, like you'll see it quickly. And then it kind of makes you feel a little bit dumb. So then you kind of have to talk yourself through that. And you just have to say, hey, self, right? When you know better, you do better. Okay. So this stuff begins to come more naturally over time, but sometimes we need to point it out. Next, in the extras category, we have popcorn Pomodoro. So those of you who have ADHD as well are going to be familiar with this one. The Pomodoro method is where you set a timer for a given amount of time and you stay 100% focused on that task until the timer goes off. So let's say that you've got a problem that you're trying to solve, and maybe it's a big problem, okay? Like it's like maybe where do I want to move to? What city do I want to move to, right? Or maybe it's a creative problem, like, who's my target audience or whatever, right? Whatever it is. And, there's something that I like to do sometimes that's really helpful, at least to spur myself into action, because sometimes we can get paralyzed, right? It's the, paralyzation by analyzation type thing where all of a sudden I'm like, I can't move forward. I don't even know where to start, right? It's being buried in that closet that I spoke about in the first episode of this. It is like I can't even move in here, right? And so what the challenge is this. You're going to put your timer on your phone. This is where the Pomodoro piece comes in, right? And you're going to stay focused on coming up with as many different solutions, possible solutions, as you can before that timer goes off. So if I want a solution, I have to come up with 5 minutes worth of solutions. Okay. Or you can do a number count. You could say 50. I'm going to make this like one of those, time tested math facts, that we used to do in elementary school kind of endeavor, right? I'm going to just make a goal here and I'm going to give myself a time limit, right? And so take, for example, the idea of where should I move to? Where should I live? So that timer's going to go off and I'm going to come up with like 50 cities, right? Tulsa, Oklahoma, Shreveport, Louisiana, Tallahassee, Florida, Boston, Massachusetts, right? Um, Mackinac Island, Michigan, whatever it is, I'm going to come up with a bunch of different solutions. And usually, I mean, this is kind of actually poor example because you would have had to really narrow down the places that you are willing to move. You're not just going to randomly pull out cities from your butt crack, right? But so it's going to require a little bit of research ahead of time. But really, you know, take something else. What are you going to do with your kid who's driving you crazy, right? Well, solution number one, I could lock him up. Solution number two, I could call the cops on him. Solution number three, I could make him go get a job and pay me back for the window that he broke. Solution number four, like you just start getting focused on like what are the different things I can do. And parenting's a little bit different because, of course, you're going to try and figure out what is the currency of that child, right? These aren't like one size fits all type things. But the idea is you will get a lot of ideas flowing. And usually within that 5 minutes or those 50 answers that you've come up with, usually about halfway through, I find that either halfway through, there's a couple that really stick out, or at the very beginning. It's like the first times or the first things that I've been thinking of because I have actually spent the most time considering those two things, right? The ones at the very beginning. So again, these things kind of jump out at you, they pop out of you, but you need that popcorn type fast, get a bunch of solutions out on paper, and then it becomes pretty obvious the things that you should at least consider marinating on a little bit more and ditch the rest. Okay. Okay. Next for the extras is bedtime brain versus morning brain. So, the worst piece of marital advice I have ever been given was, of course, shockingly given to me by the church, as many of us who are products from the evangelical church of the 80s and the 90s can attest. Some of the worst life advice ever was given to us, not by professionals, but by lay people. And P.S., I myself am not a professional or a doctor, anything like that, nor do I claim to be. I will always direct you from this point to a professional, okay, which is something that in my experience, the church never did. They basically said that they were the end all be all and claimed to be professional unprofessionals, if you know what I'm saying. That's a topic for a different time. But they used to use this verse in the Bible that said, "Never let the sun go down on your anger," as an example of how if you should have a fight with your spouse, if you had an argument, you should work all night to try and work that fight out, to come to a compromise, right? So the idea that one should stay up all night as you progressively become more and more exhausted beyond belief in the hopes of eventually reaching a well thought out logical result is nothing short of asinine, in my opinion. It is the worst advice ever. Earlier in our marriage, we tried that many times, and it always resulted in just illogical, irrational damage being done because we were exhausted. And really, to me, this is how people get information from spies. This is how false confessions are achieved by the police. It is by sleep deprivation. It's ridiculously dangerous to stay up all night and hash something out when your brain is, in my opinion, just not functioning at its most refreshed, right? This is why you see signs on the side of the freeway that are like, "Hey, are you tired? Pull over, rest area next 11 miles, whatever it is. Need a break, need a rest," because they don't want you dying on the road, okay? The church, unconcerned with dying in your marriage. Apparently, it's worth it because they're gonna just, take this one verse, go ahead and take it out of context and tell you you need to stay up all night solving a problem and that your solution is going to be a great one after staying up all night fighting. Can't imagine anything worse now, but at the time we fully believed in all of that stuff and we gave it a whirl with zero success and probably did worse damage to our marriage than was due. Anyway, I digress. So maybe if you are a night person, maybe this is a great way to do it. And maybe it works wonderfully for you. But it's been almost 100% highly unsuccessful for me personally and for my husband for sure. So here's what I found works better for me anyway. Let's say there's a question that's on your mind. So write the question down just before you go to sleep. Try this. It may not work for you, but I found it to be very interesting because your brain will naturally try to close the loop. It's a really interesting technique that I find works really well when I'm struggling with a problem. And so I will write it down. I'll write the question down and I'll be like, okay, higher power, God, spirit, source, I can't solve this. You can. I'm going to sleep. And magically, when I wake up in the morning, I'm hoping you give me some kind of direction. Don't have to solve, the whole thing, but at least maybe I'll have a clearer, fresher perspective, right? And I am telling you, more times than it doesn't, this works for me to close the loop on a problem. At least it will give me a next step or a next thing to try. It's not like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know the answer. Like sometimes that happens, but normally my brain will have a chance to shut off, rest, and in the morning, the problem will be waiting for me, but usually with fresher eyes to address it and a clearer head and a few new ideas to go along with it. Okay, also, there's something in the 12-step program called an inventory. So, this is the next one, taking an inventory. And these are kind of looking at the hidden metrics, the things that we are sowing towards. A lot of times, these things make themselves available to show us all of this data if we've done the purging technique, right? But the hidden metrics are something that, every night you can kind of reflect back on your day, is what the big book tells us. And you sort of say, hey, what did I continue to throw that is positive into the stream of life today? And you start to write down this evidence, and then you are able to sort of see, hey, is this the person that I want to be? The person who is unavailable to spend time with their kids? Excuse me. Because I'm working all the time, or because I'm totally engrossed in a Netflix series, whatever. It really gives you some honest data. These hidden metrics are the things that need to be brought to the forefront because, again, life is short. And so these are measuring sticks for us to be able to go, yeah, I'm meeting the mark, or I'm meeting the marks that I want to meet. I'm sowing towards the positivity of this person that I want to be. And other times, an inventory is painful. And I kind of go, you know what? I need to go back to that person and make it a formal amends. I need to do what I can to right this situation and correct this problem. And I need to clean up my side of the street in this incident. Okay. So these are also important, particularly as a parent and particularly as a parent of young children. The deal is this: it's a thankless job. That's a whole nother topic in and of itself, but we need those hidden metrics. Maybe you spent 45 minutes trying to get gum out of your toddler's hair, and you stood in the shower for all that time. Maybe you ran to CVS at 9:30 at night for a project due tomorrow for your teenager and you bought them supplies. Excuse me. Whatever it is, these are the things that we need to write down, because if we don't write those down, then we don't have evidence when we're like, oh man, am I a good parent? I think I suck at parenting, right? Then we can go back to our journal and go, no, we don't. Look at that. Look at all this stuff that we did. We're a kick ass parent. Are you kidding? Look at this evidence, right? And those are really helpful things to look back on, because it helps reframe and reset and change our mindset from that negative thinking, right? We talked all about how the brain naturally defaults and clings to that negative thinking, right? So, the intangible stuff, the happiness, the peace of mind, the fulfillment, these things are not always emotions that we feel, but we can start to feel them when we look back on these journals and we see, oh my gosh, I have done a lot of good in the world today on the whole. And the reason I'm calling them hidden metrics is that they're not like dollars, they're not like money. They're not tangible things that you can hold on to that are like, hey, this is the evidence that I did a good job at work today, right? So when we make them visible, this is where journaling starts to really become a part of your lifestyle, right? And that's why it works, because we get a chance to process, we get to see outside of ourselves, we get to go back, we get to look at different times in our life and see what we're thinking and feeling, and we get to see the personal growth, right? And at the end of the day, specifically with these extras, actually, particularly with the inventory, right? We get to say to ourselves, what did I contribute today to the stream of life on the whole? And that can be just walking around the house picking up kid crap. Okay. You are raising human beings, and that is contributing to the stream of life. What excited me today? What was something fun, right? What drained me of my energy today? And what did I learn today? You can start there. You can start just with those questions. And if you are a stay-at-home parent, kids might be the answer to all of those things. What excited me today? What drained me of energy? What did I learn? Right? Right. It's very humbling. It's just the hardest job in the world, in my opinion. Right. So honestly, you will start to see these patterns if you keep track of this stuff like 5 days in a row of inventory, right? Every business takes an account of what they've got on the shelves. And this is an honest way of doing that. And it's an honest way of letting yourself know that you're doing an incredible job, right? And you get to say, you know what? I'm not a fan of this. I'm going to change it. Whatever it is, it brings things that were in the darkness out into the light, right? And sometimes it's difficult to confront our shadow self, and also necessary. Other times we see things about ourselves that we completely overlooked because we were so focused on all of the things that we perceived as negative things, or we were believing in false narratives or adopting limiting beliefs. So I hope you enjoyed this series as much as I did. I hope you give some of these techniques a whirl, and really, truly, if nothing else, I just, my hope for you is gratitude. That is my hope. That is just my like surefire magic bullet that will pull me out of a tailspin funk faster than anything. So, as always, be kind, rewind. Thank you so much for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.